Delighted to have on again Jen Perelman, who is running a repeat campaign against Debbie Wasserman Schultz down in southern Florida. Obviously, this was 8 years ago, so it's a little less fresh. But once upon a time, DWS was on that figurative bullseye right next to Hillary Clinton as the most hated corporate shill in America among the progressive left. I think she's still up there. And you are running against her now in a more traditional campaign because you ran in 2020, which was really hamstrung by COVID. You couldn't really campaign at all. Still did decent. And now you're running against her. The district has changed. The boundaries have changed. Shall we say maybe less old and Jewish, even though I love our old Jewish brethren.
Yes.
Decent amount more young people, more
Latino, very heavily Latino.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a card-carrying AIPAC member and part of the Israel Can Do No Wrong club, and part of the club that calls you anti-Semitic if you dare criticize Israel. So first, I want to start. We're going to play your ad, but I want to wait for more people to trickle in. You have I thought, a really powerful ad talking about why, as a Jewish woman, you won't take money from AIPAC. But I just look at this. We've had protests now for 7-8 months. We have led the charge. By the way, smash that like button, share this live stream. John covered another protest over the weekend. We have covered now nearly 60 protests. We have led any outlet in America covering these protests. John has been up and down the streets of New York, D.C., rain, hot, heat, noon, 3 a.m. This guy has been out there, and we are dedicated to covering this. And, in many ways, Jen, it becomes kind of repetitive. But if we don't cover it, people lose sight that there's still active protests going on. But I wanted to ask you, what's been your reception down there? Because you have ran, I wouldn't say it's your top issue, but one of your top issues has been opposition to Israel's genocide, which the majority of Americans, polling-wise, seem to agree with you.
It's very interesting here locally because I feel like those two groups of people, whether it's the secular Jews that may be on the fence about Debbie that could be potential voters, how much this issue about Israel and me being an anti-Zionist, how much that affects that. Yes, that is something that we consider. But like you said, the demographics have changed significantly. And for the most part, the places where I am spending my most time are in communities that are not that particular community demographically. So the people that I'm around are much more, I would say, like-minded with the majority of people in that they are opposed to what is going on. As in the majority of the real rabid Zionists in my district are Republicans. And again, this isn't a judgment, it's just a demographic observation. And so as a result, they are not voting in our primary. And so I don't deal a lot with a lot of the very Zionist people, even canvassing or at events, because they are not even in our target audience. So, and again, our district right now is 46% Latino. So, for whatever that's worth. And so things have changed a lot here. And I spend more time in vulnerable communities than affluent white Jewish ones.
And, something that really strikes me is obviously, listen, I don't subscribe to the whole we're spending our tax dollars there rather than here.
Right.
We have all the money in the world, modern monetary theory. However, people are starting to wonder, including people that aren't anti-Israel per se, but are tired of high grocery prices, are tired of, the inflation that's still stubborn, despite them saying it's getting better. How it is we could just kind of snap our fingers and send, hundreds of billions of dollars, not really to defense. I mean, this is not they keep saying this is a war. A war is fought between two armies, generally on a battlefield somewhere. This, the Palestinians do not have a way to defend themselves. But I am hearing from more people, I'm curious about you, that are frustrated with their wallets are thinning ever so rapidly. But it seems our focus is on sending money everywhere else.
Well, this has been the case forever. We've been defunding our social programs in this country and saying, crying austerity, and for years and years, while continuing to send more and more money to American empire overseas, and in doing things that the majority of people in this country are against consistently. Like, this has been going on for years. This is nothing new. I actually appreciate that more and more people are seeing it right now. That's what it feels like to me. Like, it's almost like we're at today I was speaking with Mark Steiner on the Real News, and he calls it the precipice. And maybe that is, like, we're sort of at this point where everybody is more able to see it than has seen it before. But the interference in the covering of this has all been going on for years and years and years. This corporatism, this complete takeover. And yeah, it's an uphill battle. For sure, this is an uphill battle. But I feel inspired by the amount of people that are now seeing it that weren't even talking about this even 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And I want to read this from the New York Times. Supporters of Israel, this is about Jamal Bowman's race. Which, is like, apparently somehow New York City is Israel's north or east, west, excuse me. And this has become the top issue in this race because AIPAC is making it that. But supporters of Israel have since provided George Latimer with a huge financial advantage. AIPAC has been his top campaign bundler, helping him amass $2.5 million in cash for the race's final sprint, compared with Bowman's $1 million. Spending by AIPAC, United Democracy Project, has dwarfed those figures and could make the race most expensive House primary in history. Another group, Democratic Majority for Israel, has spent $1 million against Bowman. And Fair Shake, a cryptocurrency-focused super PAC, plans to spend $2 million. That Democratic Majority from Israel flooded money against Nina Turner, Bernie. I want to ask you, obviously, you're not, fortunately, on the receiving end of this onslaught from AIPAC, but if you get elected, you pretty quickly will be.
Yeah.
You pretty quickly will be. What are your thoughts on these other races? I mean, Jamal Bowman, you know, I'm not entirely enthused with everything he's done.
Right.
I think he'd be better than, you know, the shill running against him.
Oh, yeah.
But it sure seems to me that a lot of these races where Israel does not affect people's lives whatsoever in this district, other than Zionists and, you know, going to Shabbat, that's all you're seeing on TV ads. And you're basically seeing Jamal Bowman being painted almost as like a Hamas supporter.
Right. Yeah, no, this is definitely problematic. And I remember seeing it with Nina twice, like, you know, fairly back to back, that this is a common theme that we see running. But at the end of the day, they could keep getting more and more money. They reach the point of diminishing marginal returns on how much money they have. And what really matters is these candidates' ground games. And I can't speak as to Jamal Bowman's ground game. I don't know what that really looks like. All the money in the world. So what it really, for any campaign, whether it's a challenger or an incumbent or whatever it is, you need the amount of money that you need to reach the voters that you need to vote for you in that race. It's math. Now, all the money in the world for the other person makes them get more name recognition for sure. But you still have your people you have to reach. And let's not forget that Jamal Bowman is the incumbent. So the name recognition is definitely in his favor as well. So I think, you know, look, obviously I am rooting for Jamal, obviously. And I root against anything that is as insidious as AIPAC. You know, this is unacceptable that we're even watching this and commenting on the fact that we're watching in live time that this organization that is for foreign interests is interfering in our elections. And yet we have people that are still claiming that Russia is the problem.
Right. By the way, we recently learned Israel has a whole network of bots, you know, those scary Russian bots that stole the election from Hillary. Sure. Israel has a whole network of bots that, you know, Rachel Maddow forgot to do a whole segment crying about the threat to democracy. If it was Russian bots, you know she would. I want to show people, you just did an ad specifically about, you know, your being Jewish, why you will not take a cent from AIPAC. I thought it was pretty powerful. Let's take a look at that.
This is me at 16 years old in Israel on a high school trip holding an assault rifle, and this is the definition of indoctrination. I grew up in North Miami Beach. I grew up in a very insulated very Jewish community. We were taught that Palestine and Palestinians, that's not a real thing, that was made up by Arabs. Everybody over there that wasn't Jewish was just Arabs. But the message was always clear that Jews were not safe and that the Arabs wanted to hurt us. My relatives, my great-grandmother, my grandmother were raised with this fear mentality that without the state of Israel, Jews around the world will not be safe. True history was kept from us. We were propagandized. But as I grew older, I began to see a different reality unfolding. I witnessed the rise of the Israeli lobby, exerting its influence on our politics and policies.
It's a great ad.
Yeah. Kudos to Pat McGee and his team. They were amazing. And these are people. This is a gentleman who did this that does documentary work, not not somebody who does campaign ads normally. So yeah, it was really, yeah. And there's a few more like it that are coming from that same crew. But yeah,
I'm curious. You pointed out, indoctrination, whatnot. Obviously, there's a lot of young Jewish people who go on this birthright trip, which I went on. I didn't know that Sheldon Adelson funded it. I didn't even know who Sheldon Adelson was. I just went because it was free and, try to, drink booze and, maybe have some excitement. But yep. It dawns on me, there's a lot of people, I think, particularly Jewish people in America, that are having that awakening, that they're not anti-Judaism, they're not even anti-Israel existing, but they kind of feel like they've been lied to about Palestinians, that there's been basically what we were taught about the horrors of the Holocaust, that we are doing a lot of those things that were done to us now. Obviously, when you're talking to Latinos and other people, that might not be the top issue. But have you talked to, in your campaigning, people like you that might have had this awakening?
Sure. And more than anything, I have people that are reaching out to me because of this. And because so many people, especially in certain parts of the country and Jewish communities, feel particularly isolated from people. I've even been setting up older people on friendship matchmaking situations, because I've had a couple of an older Jewish gentleman reach out to me a few months ago. He's 84 and he saw me and he was inspired, and he just cannot figure out what has gone. All his friends, he says, have lost their minds. They have lost their minds. And so I've been sort of connecting as many people that are coming up and together as I can, because at the end of the day, there are more of us. And it's really just about building that coalition of people and having people feel that solidarity, because when it feels like you're alone, it's you feel a lot less effective. And so it's defeatist feeling. I think it's important for people to understand that there are a lot of people like us. Unfortunately, the people with the money and the capital are fighting against us, but there are way more of us. And it's hard to see through that sometimes. So I think oftentimes I think people just need a little inspiration.
Right. And shifting away from the Israel-Gaza situation for a minute, it's remarkable to me. I remember in 2016, I covered Tim Canova before he lost his mind. He was running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And it was pretty remarkable in the 23rd district at the time. I'd say the majority of people didn't even know there was a primary.
Right.
Didn't even know who their congressperson was. You see this also. I met you on the ground in Cleveland. I was covering Nina Turner's primary. Most people there, if they know there's a primary, their only exposure to or getting information is 30-second TV ads. Yeah. And that's what informs them, because most people are not diehard into politics. And if they're going to vote, all they hear is the ads. So that's why all this AIPAC money flooding in is so important, because a lot of times AIPAC's ads might not be specifically about Israel.
No, they're usually not. They're usually not about Israel.
Right. But it's pretty damaging if you are, have less money to compete, because most voters are, I don't want to say low information, but don't have a lot of time, and their only exposure would be this onslaught of TV digital ads, which are going to paint, in Bowman's case, his opponent as, reasonable, moderate, pro-Israel, and paint Bowman as like a supporter from us, which is not the same thing. And I'm sure AIPAC, if need be, will spend money to support Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah, we're in a mixed bag situation, because Debbie's strategy with me going back to 20, and what she's still doing right now, is to pretend that this isn't happening. She doesn't even acknowledge there's a primary. She doesn't even people just wonder, oh, she's showing up at things lately. Huh, that's interesting. I mean, she doesn't even acknowledge.
You mean the candidate who is fighting for democracy along with the Democratic Party doesn't acknowledge she has a primary challenger?
Oh, God, no. No, she doesn't acknowledge there's a primary. And I would love somebody to ask her point blank, but nobody seems to want to do that. But so, yeah, she just pretends it's not happening. So on the one hand, I was concerned early on about how much I thought that the Israel lobby would come after me. But that is now being tempered by her probably holding them back, because she doesn't want any attention brought to this race. Her strategy is to pretend it's not happening. And let me be very clear. We had 14% voter turnout in a primary here, 14%. So when these AIPAC and all these lobby groups are spending all this money on the TV ads and at the end of the day, those ads are on repeat for a small echo chamber number of registered Democratic voters. And what it really comes down to is these candidates' ground game, which is what I said to you before, because all the ads at the end of the day will not compete with a quality ground game, because their interactions will be by mailer and TV, or paid people that are not really, that are just there. It's not the same thing as having volunteers and canvassers that really believe in what you're doing. So I don't know their ground game, but if they have a good one and they're really knocking doors and they're really on the ground talking to the voters that they need, and I'm talking in a 14% voter, that's how little you need to actually get out to vote. I need 50,000 votes. That's it. And keep your eye on that, right? So no matter how much money they put in, you have to get your 50,000 voters out. That's the game. So I can't comment what other people do on their ground.
Absolutely. Smash the like button. Almost 200 watching. We need a lot more than that. Definitely check out Jen's campaign at her website, which is
Jen2024.org.
I put you in a Marco Rubio situation there.
Oh, yeah. No, and seriously, and guys, and anyone who does know me knows that I'm like forever Cottonmouth.
Yeah, there you go. But also recently, it's not unusual. Florida, again, underwater, mass flooding.
Yeah.
Hurricane season seems to be starting soon. These are kind of life or death matters.
It's environmental Russian roulette. We've been playing it since I was a kid. It's fun. Stick around every year.
So I'm expecting Debbie Wasserman Schultz to roll out her bold, climate policy that she's
No,
going to
but
fight
it's
for?
funny. It's funny you say that because she will put out and she uses, look, when you're the elected and you're the incumbent, you have that advantage to use that position for free media. That's just the nature of the game. So she will put out her hurricane preparedness mailer. She might have already done it, that goes out to everyone in the district with her picture on it, talking about hurricane preparedness. And that, of course, is paid for by, you know, what? But anyway, her official congressional capacity. Right. And because it's official information. But yes, so no, she will definitely tell us to be prepared for hurricane season. But she still invests in fossil fuel and fracking companies. So it's hard to take that too sincerely.
And I also think the people down there, the voters, should know grocery prices are one of the biggest, wallet sucks across the country. Florida's inflation rate for a long time was higher than the national rate. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, one of the biggest lobbies she's paid off by is Big Sugar, which is king and queen down in South Florida. Can you describe what you know about Debbie Wasserman Schultz's relationship with the sugar special interest down there? Because it would seem to be at odds with lowering prices at the grocery store.
Oh, it's at odds with everything. It's at odds with our ecological systems. I mean, it's at odds. So her history with Big Sugar long predates me ever running against her. What's interesting is when I ran against her in 20, actually there's a lobbying group down here, an environmental group that's fights Big Sugar, and it's called Bull Sugar. Bull Sugar is the name of the group. And they actually reached out to me back in 20, and because of her history and because they have been monitoring her on this issue for so long. So this wasn't anything I ever had to even point out to anybody. That's what's great about it. She does take money from the sugar industry, and the sugar industry in Florida is one of our biggest agricultural and industrial polluters. That's just the nature of industry. I'm not saying that's different than other places. That's what we have here. And there's a lot of problems with where the sugar industry is located. It's in Central Florida, and it's just right at the southern part of Lake Okeechobee. And essentially what happens is all of the runoff that comes, that's supposed to be flourishing and thriving and making our Everglades grow, is contaminated with all sorts of different chemicals and this kind of stuff you're covering in what you're doing. But just whatever runoff comes from that industry. I can't even remember the names of these chemicals, right? But I do know that it creates this major blue-green algae situation that is suffocating and starving our manatees because it's killing all the other plant life in the water. And so then the manatees are starving. And it's also exacerbating red tide in the Gulf, which is a huge problem. And people don't realize how much this affects tourism. This isn't just a matter of, oh, the poor fish and, oh, the environment. Even if you're just interested in the bottom line, this hurts Florida. Nobody wants to go to Sanibel Island when there's 50-pound groupers washed up all over the beach. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody, and creatures that come from so deep that you never want to see them on shore ever. And I've seen some of these things, and I assure you, these are things that are not meant for us to ever see. They should not be here. So if they're on the shore, it's because something's wrong. Right. So no, that doesn't help us.
And I'd like to ask you a broader psychological question.
Am I qualified? I don't know if I'm qualified for broad psychological questions, Jordan.
Well, talking about your psychological brain. So I think
we'll see. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I even feel it. I'm kind of, there's kind of a deflated balloon mentality here with the progressive left. We're in a post Bernie world. We're in a, I don't get into fraud squad or whatever, but they certainly didn't do what they said they were going to do. AOC is out there doing seminars with, on anti-Semitism with Zionists. Jabal Bowman, I think he's got a good heart, but he's, they don't leverage their votes whatsoever. I haven't heard Medicare for all or a strategy from any of them in a long time. And they kind of have hopped onto this, not now. Let's, keep Biden in.
Right. Every 4 years, that's what they do. That's the same thing every 4 years.
But if these folks stay in there, I mean, let's say Trump loses, Biden wins, and, whatever the case may be, drops out or isn't with us anymore, and it's Kamala versus Tom Cotton in 2028. I mean, I see these people saying the same thing. Tom Cotton, DeSantis, name your flavor of crazy. So,
I was more upset by the Kamala.
But what do you really do if you get in there to Congress? Because, I mean, It
Where
doesn't
does
really
this go?
seem like I don't think they're all one Jen Perelman rah-rah speech away from becoming a little bit more,
No.
dare I say, aggressive or rabble-rousing.
No, I'm not
though
even a good speech giver. I mean, I would prompt Nina Turner or Dr. West or someone like that to do that more so than me. But yeah,
basically right now we have people in Congress that theoretically believe in leftist and progressive values who are not willing to show some spine, leverage votes, play hardball. And as a result, we have this merry-go-round of, lesser of two evils, neoliberalism, and a real crisis happening when it comes to climate, housing, in what I cover a lot, environmental genocide.
yeah.
What could you even do if you get in there?
It's a really good question. And I honestly do not know until I'm there. But what I can just tell you what I've observed and what I see and what I notice. But we're playing like this Monday morning quarterback because we only know parts of what we see. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And so it's really hard for me. I mean, there's definitely things I've been disappointed by, that I have felt defeated by. And the fact that we even call it post Bernie is an indicator of what the real problem is. And I think that the real problem is that there was never a clear cut mission among people as much as it was just Bernie. And while that would have been great, don't get me wrong, I was all for that. And I think we'd be infinitely better off in so many ways. Once that ended, a lot of the people just sort of evaporated because for them, it was about him or the squad or whoever it is. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you elect. The movement on the outside has got to be connected to the movement on the inside. This isn't just about getting policy passed. They spend more time censuring each other up there than getting policy passed anyway. That's all they do is sit up there and fight amongst each other. The bigger question is, what could you be doing with that platform, with your voice? What could you be doing if you didn't care about being reelected? I don't know. I don't know that I've ever seen that. So it might be a first. But
do you think, I mean, obviously you can't know till you're there. I look at someone like Cori Bush, who I don't think is a sellout or anything like that, but
No.
I met when I was covering Black Lives Matter protests in St. Louis. She was on the ground there, hardcore activist, a nurse, single mother. And I would say her voice has kind of gotten a little neutered there. She did the little, protest on the Capitol Hill steps for, to stop evictions. But other than that, I don't want to say she's played the game, but she's certainly not the hardcore activist I have seen on the streets in Congress. Yeah. Do you think that's just, you won't know if that happens to you until you get there? Or
well, yeah. And the difference is, and I've said this before, and this is not in any judgment of any of those people, because I know Cori and I know Jamal. I haven't met Alex personally, but Cori is a fighter and Cori is doing what she feels is best for her district. That's all I can say. And in truth, the desire to be reelected isn't just self-serving. And I do get that, because somebody like Cori, for example, yeah, of course, I'm sure she does like having a secure job and benefits. Who wouldn't? I wouldn't. I'm not rejecting that concept either. Okay. But she also does know that if it's not her there, that's going to be infinitely worse for her people, or at least that could be a very genuine belief. And so to some extent, you have to play the game, or you could lose your seat to someone that could really do some damage to your people. And I think that even very well-intended people do believe, I think that's more of the mindset with people like Cori and even Alex, is just maintaining position because they're so worried about losing any position. And that's their strategy. And I'm not going to criticize that strategy. I don't agree with everything that Alex has done. I don't have to. That's not her job. Is not for everyone to agree with her. Certainly not for me to agree with her. But for me, it's not about me being in Congress. So that's not my mission. I have a much broader mission than that. This is one part of what I'm doing. And that's the other thing. Everything I do on my campaign is not simply a means to me being elected. Never has been. Everything that I do on my campaign is part of my mission of building my brand and building a coalition towards what I see as the betterment where I'm trying to go. Now, for me, I want May Day 2028 general strike. That's what I want. So in my mind, what I'm doing is sort of in that vein. And this is just one project.
Right. I'd also like to ask you, before you ran, you focused a lot on criminal justice reform down there. Well, if you haven't noticed, we're 4 years after George Floyd was basically lynched on camera, and the police are acting more brazen. Not to mention Biden gave $32 billion more to police. In this case, in the case of Trump, I will say it could get worse because he's basically saying go harder to the police and rough up those protesters. But we've been covering it. John Farina has covered nearly 60 of these events. You got cops punching pro-Palestinian protesters in the chest. You got them just randomly pulling people who are walking off to the sidewalk down, beating them. We've seen them bloodying people's faces. These are unarmed people. And it kind of has just been normalized. The media doesn't really report it. If they do report it, it's very sympathetic of the police. If you got in there, what would be some of the criminal justice things you're pushing?
Yeah, I mean, well, what we're talking about is something that is a very hard thing for me to talk about because I keep falling further and further to the left on this. I actually was at one of the Cop City weekend actions that took place in Atlanta. And so the idea of what's going on with what we call law enforcement, but really isn't, they're not enforcing laws. They're just policing us. There's a very big difference between law enforcement and policing. And right now, all we're seeing is policing. And it's extremely scary. And I don't think people understand that these cop cities are now going to start being everywhere. This is not a one-off. They have been planning for this. In fact, that is what you have been seeing. What you say you haven't seen since George Floyd is what's been going on behind the scenes with these cop cities. Because instead of that being sort of a starting point for us to see some legitimate reform, all that has been is a starting point for the policing industry to be building up its reserves and planning for more and more revolutions. And that's all they're doing. And they're so over militarized, it's horrifying. And so, I don't use the word abolition because it freaks people out. But what we have as policing is not what we need in this civilization. It just isn't. That's just not what we need. So, I don't know that it's a matter of, oh, you can just reform that. I think we're kind of past that at this point. But there are certain things that have to be put into play. We need to end qualified immunity. I think that all of these, none of them should be immune from criminal or civil action. And I think it should come out of their police pensions. I think that when you have it be collectively, then when civil suits and liability start coming out of their pensions instead of the municipal tax dollars, they will start policing themselves more so. And that still isn't the only solution. But there's many different little things that can be put into place. They need to not be able to be having military equipment. That entire operation is off the wall to me. And I was walking, this was in Cop City, personal anecdote. And I don't know, have you been to where Cop City is?
We've covered it, yeah.
I know.
Been there.
Right,
I haven't.
Tina's been there. You haven't been there. Okay. So I'm walking up this public road with a group of people, and I kid you not, and I am a hippie, and I am surrounded by tree hippies carrying saplings that they want to go plant in the forest and singing "Love is Our Strength." That's the premise of this. Nobody has weapons. Nobody is even rowdy, literally marching, singing this. And we come up to this block on a public road, mind you, of tanks and police in riot gear and tanks. And they had those sound things, which is what really scares me. That is what I am most scared of, are those sound things, because I feel like that'll pop my eardrum. Like, that kind of freaks me out. So to fight against tree hippies singing "Love is Our Strength," we have gone very awry. Very, very awry. And if people don't recognize that is like, this is the same difference as the distinction between Israel and what's going on in Gaza. This is the same sort of level of power disparity that we're talking about. You have tree hippies and you have tanks. Like, in what universe does that even seem remotely reasonable to people? So it's, again, the level of violence is dictated by the oppressor, always. Always. It is never determined by the oppressed. So whatever level of violence we're seeing is being determined by the oppressor, always. So that's who's responsible for this. And obviously it's coming straight through our policing, which is now like paramilitary. And it's incredibly scary. And I wish I had something comforting to say to people, but I don't. It's incredibly scary. I would suggest everybody always have bail money and always have a lawyer and an advocate on speed dial if you're going to get involved in these things, because this is going to, I unfortunately think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And all I can do is just be loud as I can be.
I would argue also, you know, Chris Hedges has talked about late stage capitalism and the end of empires. We've seen there are many cop cities being proposed in many other places. And I would say that might be the neoliberal ether preparing for the late stage capitalism and potentially general strikes or more aggressive organizing. Last question. This is more Florida based, but could be nationally based. Seeing a lot of murmurs that Rubio might be Marco Rubio might be on the short list for vice president.
Marco
I mean, in today's Republican Party, I guess he's kind of like a normie, but by policy, he's just as radical as the next guy. I think Trump might pick him actually, just because he kind of has that Pence thing in terms of moderate normie politician, but will basically do whatever Trump wants. Well, in this case, I guess Pence didn't do everything Trump wanted. But what should people know about Rubio since he's been a senator of Florida?
He's just useless. He's just useless. And again, our other senator is Rick Scott, who is one of the most vile people ever and should be in prison for actually, he has a death count attached to him because of the Medicare and Medicaid crap that guy pulled. So anyway, so for us, Rubio is like, he's just feckless. But it would make sense for Trump to pick him, because Trump needs to pick somebody that he can belittle and that he thinks of as much less charismatic and much less, he needs somebody that will like lick his boots. And the fact that it's somebody with a Latino name, that makes sense too. I mean, it makes sense demographically for him to pick. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. But Rubio is just, look, Democrats can't stand him. And the Republicans don't really think about him one way or the other, which is what's interesting. But he's still not hated as much as Rick Scott, which is why I knew that there was no chance of taking him out in 22. Which was a ridiculous waste of money mission. Yeah, Rubio is not loathed enough. He's just not. He's just not even considered very much.
Before I let you go, tell people the who, what, why, when, and where. When is the primary? What do you need from people? Where can they find and share that ad? And, you know, what's your shot? What's your shot at winning?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was possible. We did decently in 20, and given the amount of effort and work that we've put in on the ground since then, and even just with name recognition, I mean, there's just the different variables that I think work in our favor. But yeah, we need help. We need money. We need volunteers. We need people to sign up for phone banking and text banking. And you guys can do all of that at gen2024.org. Also, you need to follow us on social media. We are at Jen FORFL25. So it's Jen for flu 25. And and the video, I'm pretty sure it's on all of our, it's pins, I think, on all of our social media. You can find it. But we need people to help. We need people on the phones. We need people. And if you live down here, we need people knocking doors. That is what we need to do. That is how you win, even despite whatever money gets thrown at us. And we do need money. So I know that this is one of the sort of ironies of the whole situation, is that the people on the left are generally the people without the means that are struggling. Like, we fight for the least of these, and yet we still need the people that are the most of these to help us so that we can fight for the least of these. This is sort of the problem. Like, the people I fight for, unfortunately, are not the people that can really help me do that. So we do need people to donate.
And it's funny you say that, because I was talking to someone the other day about how Status Coup needs a fuck ton more money to keep the lights on. And he's like, well, why don't you just reach out to, X, Y, and Z progressive with money? And I'm like, I've made my living talking to poor people.
Right.
So I don't have those connections to just call, so-and-so and ask for $100,000. But I digress. Also, I will say, not that I'm advocating, let's have poll watchers here, like, Trump people say. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been known to do some fuckery in elections. So you certainly do need, volunteers or what have to keep their eyes on the ground, not on primary day, but before that, make sure that lawn signs are not being, pulled down. Make sure that there's not mysterious vans somewhere doing weird things. So if you want to volunteer for Jen's campaign, go to her website. The links are in the description. Thank you for joining us. We'll keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, Jordan.